We are back. You are chatting with John P. Today, I'm going to be talking about how the coronavirus is affecting the watch industry. And I think it's very important to note that while the watch industry has already been affected by this, I think we're going to see some larger and greater complications in the watch industry show up, certainly in the short term, and I'm going to be talking about it. But please do not forget to thumbs up, like, and subscribe. I really do appreciate it. And of course, you can check out delraywatch.com, where so far we have not been affected by the coronavirus, at least that I know of. So here's the news that just came out today, is that Baselworld 2020 has been canceled. Now, this is huge news, right? We already knew that SIHH, which was renamed to Watches and Wonders, was canceled, but recently Baselworld made a statement as of, I believe, 2 days ago, and they said, oh, we're monitoring the situation, but I think everything's going to be okay. And then what happened was the Swiss government released kind of a mandate saying any event over 1,000 people can just no longer take place for the short term. And so, of course, that forced Baselworld's hand, and they had to cancel Baselworld 2020. Now, officially, they said that they've postponed it. So it's not canceled. Canceled kind of has kind of negative connotation to it. So they postponed it, but basically they postponed it to the end of January 2021, which in my opinion is basically a cancellation for the year 2020. And when we think of Baselworld, this was supposed to be an incredibly formative year for the fair. As time goes on and the fairs become less important, the fairs have started to develop into more of a luxury experience. They were positioning themselves as more of a vacation, a destination. Hotels come there, congregate, meet other watch collectors, and less of a trade show where you just check out what the latest releases are, with endless statements from brands previously saying how excited they were to be able to pair the watches with cars and hotels and food and experience. And now it's over, at least in the short term. So this is a big deal. Now, the canceling of this fairs, what does this mean for the brands in relation to the fairs? Well, I think we're going to see a lot less orders come from authorized dealers, because this is a lot of what would go on at these shows. Authorized dealers would attend, they'd get a lot of hype and excitement from the parties and all the different events that they had, and kind of get the authorized dealers liquored up a little bit, and they'd place some big orders, maybe at a larger discount than they would have otherwise. And so I think we're gonna see some decrease in sales, primary because of the lack of being able to go to these shows this year. In addition, we're going to see there just be not great PR surrounding new watch releases. The new models, if there are new models, and there certainly are going to be improvements or new models, they need to come out, right? The brands and the Swiss brands and the German brands and even the Japanese brands now, they've developed, and by the way, Grand Seiko canceled their summit as well, and so did Montblanc, so I'll throw that in there as well. The brands spend a lot of time, money, and energy building these models, and they have to release, and they have to continue in their financial plans. Remember, these are publicly traded companies, most of them overseas, outside of the US market, but still publicly traded companies nonetheless, so they have to continue, right? They're large, very big moving machines, and it took a lot of pushing and effort just to get to that point. So they have to release the models. The PR is not going to be excellent. They're not going to be able to kind of circulate around videos from Basel and SIHH, who are now Watches and Wonders, for release parties. They're not going to be able to do any of that. They're going to have to go with traditional marketing, and that's problematic for the brands, where luxury is kind of all about the experience and the feeling, and they're just missing that huge key component. So I think we're going to see pretty large, lackluster releases coming from the brands this year. Unfortunately, even if the watches are great, the PR and the buzz around them can only go so far without those initial launch events and parties. The other thing that we need to consider is that the coronavirus has largely, until this point, been affecting China and other parts of Asia, predominantly China. And China has been one of the largest consumers of luxury goods, especially luxury watches, in the last handful of years. And that's interesting, right? So if China is as bad as the media portrays, and even not as bad, but still relatively bad, we're going to see a lot of negative effects coming from that region. Sales were already started to decline, probably just because of a somewhat leveling off in terms of their growth, right? China has had explosive growth over the last decade, but it can only stay explosive for so long until they kind of catch up with everyone else. And when you consider that they already pulled back a little bit and now they're being affected by something like this coronavirus, we're going to see sales absolutely plummet coming out of China, and that is going to hurt the brands, right? That's going to hurt the brands both for new watches as well as secondary or gray market watches, because remember, gray market watches most of the time are coming from either the brands but also the authorized dealers, largely authorized dealers out of Asia that bought too much stock and couldn't sell it. So we're also going to see gray market prices kind of climbing up just because of the lack of supply and less to move. In addition, we have the pre-owned market. Now, not all pre-owned watches come from Asia, but I think it's very fair to say a decent amount of attractive price pre-owned watches are sourced in Asia, right? Some dealers they'll go to the Hong Kong watch show, or they'll go to other places. They'll go to Japan and they'll go to some watch auctions, and they'll bid on watches, and they'll bring them over here in large bulk watches, watch packages, millions of dollars of watches, and they'll bring them over and they'll kind of get distributed through the United States and pre-owned. And without that, we're going to see brands like Omega, Tudor, maybe not so much Rolex because the Rolex is here, but because of Asia and what's going on there with the coronavirus and the widespread of it, we're going to see the prices potentially with Omega and Tudor start climbing because of the lack of new pieces introduced into the United States market. I think it's incredibly fair to say that one of the main reasons that used pricing or pre-owned pricing in the United States has been so low on some watch brands and models compared to the retail is just because of the increased amount of supply that there is here, because the United States is a very large consumer of pre-owned watches compared to places like Hong Kong and Japan. So without that extra influx of pre-owned watches into the United States market, I think we're going to see a little bit more of a competitive market in terms of being able to source watches, and I think we're going to have to see the pricing come up a little bit. Now, at DelReyWatch.com, we have not seen any of the effects of that as of yet, but we do business with a lot of dealers and a lot of dealers that buy in large packages from Asia, very large packages, and they're just not able to go, right? The Hong Kong watch show is canceled, so they can't go there. They can't source any brands, including Rolex, and that does hurt a lot of people in the industry. So it's something very interesting that we should keep our eyes on and look at. Now, what else does this mean? There's another trend with micro brands today, brands that are predominantly sourcing their parts in Asia, but sometimes in Switzerland. It's a mix. I'm not talking about any particular brands, but micro brands generally are being produced in China. Now, if we think about it, because the coronavirus is affecting China so greatly, we're going to see a lot less labor and production coming out of that country. You can see it on the news. I don't have to tell you this. You can just Google this. But we're going to see a lot less labor coming out of that country, which means that micro brands are not going to be able to hit their quota in terms of production. If there's a factory or there's a workshop and many people are either scared of the virus, or they're not going out, or there's some type of mandate or recommendation, even in Japan, there's not that many micro brands out of Japan, but even in Japan, they're recommending people stay indoors for months at a time if they can. And so when you consider watches, micro brands that are being produced, or parts of the micro brands being produced in China, might not have a labor force or a strong labor force, we're going to see micro brands potentially cave in, right? Imagine you're a new micro brand, you did your Kickstarter campaign or something like that, or your GoFundMe, or whatever else you use to kind of crowdfund your project, your micro brand, and then you realize that some part you need for that watch that was specced out and created for you, you just can't get the bezel, or you can't get the crown, something along those lines, or it just can't be assembled. Well, here's the thing, your brand is going to absolutely collapse. You spent all this money, buzz, campaign, put it out there, got the Kickstarter going, you made your model, people are interested, they've placed their pre-orders. The micro brand is going to collapse. So something we need to look at is micro brands in the theoretical or potential output of pieces that can be coming from parts of Asia, because coronavirus is affecting the labor force. This isn't even that speculative, because when you look at brands like Apple and even Fiat Chrysler with parts for their cars, they're running out in March, and they've told people this. And so this isn't like micro brands may not be able to get parts. if it's affecting companies as large as Apple and Fiat Chrysler where they're running out of parts, don't you think that perhaps a small micro brand that makes maybe 500 pieces or less per year might run out of some parts, or the manufacturers just care a little bit less about producing those parts at such an attractive price potentially to begin with because they don't have a labor force, so they can't really do it any longer, and they're battling other more serious concerns like potentially illness. So something to keep in mind. But I wanted to release this video, and I know there's going to be someone out there that says this is clickbait. This isn't clickbait, guys. In fact, YouTube has demonetized videos with coronavirus as the topic, so less people theoretically will even see this. But I think it's very important for us to kind of monitor what's going on with this, because the watch market is really tied to economies, because these are luxury items at the end of the day. And so, if stocks start going down, or other different forms of securities or options are just not performing for people, there's going to be less disposable income, and also less people are really concerned with luxury goods. So something to keep in mind. But what do you think? Leave in the comments below. Have you already felt the effects potentially of this, depending on where you are in the world? I know a lot of people are all over the world when they watch this, so I would love to hear what you think about this in the comments below. And please do not forget the thumbs up, like, and subscribe. I really do appreciate it, and we'll see you next time. You have been chatting with John P. Ciao.